I couldn't blink. I couldn't turn my head or curl my fingers or make a single sound. But I could hear the man I married standing 3 feet away from me, telling someone on the phone that he needed this to move faster. That was the moment I understood that the worst thing about being trapped inside your own body isn't the silence. It's that the people around you stop being careful. My name is Claire. I was 29 years old when a blood vessel in my brain ruptured on a Tuesday morning while I was making oatmeal. I remember the pan, I remember the specific way the steam curled upward. And then I remember nothing until I woke up. If you can call it waking to the sound of machines and the smell of antiseptic and a darkness so complete, I thought I was dead. I wasn't dead. But I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. The doctors had a name for it, a hemorrhagic stroke with locked-in syndrome, partial, they said, which meant I retained some awareness while my body refused every single command I gave it. My left side was gone. My voice was gone. Even my eyes, for the first 2 weeks, wouldn't cooperate the way I needed them to. I was a woman sealed inside herself. Conscious and invisible at the same time. My husband came every day that first week. I knew his footsteps, that particular rhythm, heel heavy, always slightly impatient before I ever heard his voice. He held my hand during visiting hours. He spoke to the doctors in the hallway in a voice that was careful and measured and full of the right amount of grief. He told my mother he hadn't slept in days. She believed him. I would have believed him too, once. But I was inside the silence now, and the silence has a way of making everything louder. It started small. Little things I catalogued like evidence because I had nothing else to do. The way his hand on mine felt like obligation. The way he exhaled when the nurse left the room. Not grief, not relief. Just impatience. The way he stopped saying my name after the first week. Not Claire, I'm here, just I'm here. Like I had already become a pronoun. By the 3rd week, the mask came off completely. He was on his phone more than he was with me. I could hear him, not every word, but enough. A voice he used that I hadn't heard in years. Softer. Lighter. The voice he used to use with me, back when we were new. One afternoon, when the floor was quiet and the afternoon shift had just rotated, he stood by the window and spoke in a low, even tone that made my chest go cold. She's not improving. The doctor keeps saying wait and see, but I've been waiting and seeing for 3 weeks. I need to know what our options are. A pause. He was listening. I know what the will says. I was there when she signed it. Another pause. His voice dropped further. I'm not saying that, I'm saying if this goes on for months, I need to know where I stand. Financially. Legally. That's all. I wanted to scream. My lungs were full and my mind was screaming and my body gave nothing. Not a tremor. Not a tear. I lay there, perfectly still, while the man who had stood beside me at an altar 3 years ago discussed my worth like a line item. That night was the first time I felt truly alone. And then, just after 11, I heard the door open. Not the sharp swing of a nurse in a hurry. Not the careful push of a family member being quiet out of guilt. This was slow, unhurried. The sound of someone who moved through the world without rushing because they had learned a long time ago that rushing didn't change anything. A cart. The soft squeak of wheels. The faint smell of a lemon cleaning solution that I would come to associate, over the following weeks, with the only person in that building who ever made me feel less alone. Room 14, she said to herself, under her breath. Not to me. Just orienting, the way people do when they work a job alone at midnight and narration is the only company. I heard her moving around the room. Efficient, unhurried. And then, she stopped. Honey, she said softly, and I realized she was talking to me. You've got someone's grocery list on your tray table. That can't be yours. She wasn't expecting an answer, she just kept talking low, conversational, the way someone talks to a houseplant or a sleeping cat. Not performatively. Just because the silence was there and she chose to fill it with something kind. I'm Ruthie, she said. I clean this floor on nights. You probably won't remember me. Most folks don't. But I figure if I was laying there, I'd want someone to say hello. She finished her work and left. I listened to the squeak of her cart fade down the hallway. I thought about her the rest of the night. She came back the next evening, and the one after that. I don't know when she realized I might actually be listening. Maybe it was the third night, when she told me a story about her daughter and then paused, really paused, like she was waiting, and the monitor beside my bed registered a spike in my heart rate. Maybe the nurse mentioned it. Maybe she just knew. But somewhere around the end of that first week, Ruthie stopped treating me like a room she was cleaning and started treating me like a person she was visiting. She told me about her daughter, Denise, who had died in the same hospital 2 years earlier. Ovarian cancer. 3rd floor, room 7, which Ruthie had also cleaned. She said the hospital felt different to her now, not haunted, just heavy. Like a place that remembers, she said. She kept working there because leaving felt like abandoning something she couldn't name. She told me about her granddaughter, who was 6 and called her Nana Roo. She told me about the crossword puzzles she did on her lunch break and always got stuck on the same kind of clue, anything to do with geography. I've never been anywhere, she said, without self-pity. I've just been here, and here, and here. I held every story she gave me like something precious. I repeated them to myself in the dark hours after she left. Denise, Nana Roo, geography clues, because they were real and they were warm and they were mine in a way that nothing else in that room was. My husband's visits were getting shorter. By the 5th week, he came twice. He stood at the foot of my bed with his phone in his hand, scrolling, and stayed for less than 20 minutes each time. He told the nurses he was managing a lot. He told my mother the situation was taking a toll. She comforted him. I felt her hand on my arm the next day, gentle and oblivious, and I focused everything I had on squeezing her fingers back. I couldn't. But I was getting closer. The neurologist had started noticing microresponses, a slight increase in ocular tracking, a reflex that was no longer purely involuntary. She explained it to my parents, carefully, cautiously. Locked-in syndrome at this degree and her age, we have reason to be cautiously optimistic. My husband wasn't in the room when she said that. I noticed. The night after that appointment, something shifted. My husband had come in late after hours, when visiting was technically over, but the night staff knew him by then and let it go. I heard him arguing with someone on the phone in the hallway for several minutes before he came in. When the door closed, the quality of his breathing was different. Tight. Controlled in the way that means the opposite of controlled. He didn't say hello. He pulled the chair to my bedside, not to hold my hand, but to be close enough to keep his voice low. I talked to a lawyer today, he said. Not our lawyer. Someone else. I waited. Claire, I need you to understand something. This is not sustainable. The bills I cannot cover what insurance isn't covering. You know what the ICU costs per day? I've been burning through savings since week 2. His voice had the texture of someone who had been rehearsing this speech. The doctor said you might get better. Might. And she also said you might stay like this. I have to be realistic. I have to think about my life. My life. Not our life. I need you to know that I tried. I was here, every day, for almost 6 weeks. Nobody can say I didn't try. He was quiet for a moment. Then, softer, almost to himself, I just can't do this anymore. I need to talk to them about what it would look like to redirect your care. The door opened. A nurse came in to check something on my monitor. My husband sat back, became a different person in the span of one breath, composed, sad-looking, a man burdened by love. The nurse left. He didn't say anything more. He just sat there until he thought I was as asleep as I always appeared to be. Then he left. Ruthie came in an hour later. I don't know if she heard any of it. The walls were thin, and Ruthie moved up and down that hallway all night. But something was different in how she came in, slower, quieter, the way a person enters a room when they're not sure what they're walking into. She cleaned in silence for a while. Then she said, you know, when Denise was sick, really sick, those last 2 months her husband stopped coming around. Told himself a story about why. People do that. They make up reasons that make them the reasonable one. She paused. moved her cart. I wanted to hate him for it. But mostly, I just felt sorry for him. Because Denise, even at the very end, she still had more life in her than he ever did. She stopped by my bed. Her hand rested on the rail, not on me, just near me. I don't know what you can hear, honey. But I know you're in there. You've been in there this whole time. And I don't think you should be alone. She started coming twice during her shift after that. Once at the start, once at the end. She brought her crossword puzzles and read the clues out loud, leaving long pauses in case I somehow knew the answer. She told me about her granddaughter's loose tooth and a terrible movie she'd watched on her phone on break and the first real rain of October hitting the hospital windows at 2 in the morning. And somewhere in those weeks, I stopped simply surviving the nights. I started looking forward to them. It was a Thursday when everything broke open. Ruthie had just come in for her second pass of the night, just after 2. She was humming quietly, the way she always did at that hour, something low and hymn-like. I heard the cart stop, heard her set something on the counter. And then I heard footsteps. Not hers. My husband came in without knocking. In the middle of the night, long past any reasonable visiting hour, with someone beside him I could tell by the footsteps, 2 sets, and the quality of their voices when they started talking was wrong in a way that made something animal in me go completely still. The person with him was a woman. "This is her," he said. The woman made a soft sound, not sympathy. Something else. "How long has she been like this?" "Almost 7 weeks," he said. "She might recover, she might not. The doctor won't commit." The woman said something I didn't catch. My husband's voice hardened. "I have a meeting with the care team next week. I'm going to ask them to talk about options. Quality of life considerations. She would not want to live like this, I know her. She told me, years ago." "Did she put that in writing?" A pause. "Not exactly, but I'm her husband. I have medical authority." I was screaming. Every part of me was screaming, and every part of me was perfectly silent, and the distance between those two things was the cruelest thing I have ever experienced. And then something changed. Ruthie spoke. Her voice was so calm it took him a second to register that someone else was in the room. "Excuse me," she said. Just that. Quiet, even, like she was asking him to move aside in a grocery aisle. He startled. "Who are you?" "I'm the person who cleans this room every night," she said. "And I've been cleaning it for 7 weeks, which means I've heard a lot of things in here that I wasn't meant to hear." A silence. "This is a private conversation," he said. Ruthie said. The sound of her not moving. "You need to leave." "I need to finish my shift," she said. "This room is on my list. You're welcome to go somewhere else if you'd like privacy." He made a sound angry, dismissive. He said something to the woman beside him, low enough that I couldn't make it out. Then he said to Ruthie, "I don't know who you think you are, but this is my wife, and what happens to her is my decision." "That is a perspective," Ruthie said. His footsteps moved toward her. I felt the air in the room change, and then stopped. "Because Ruthie said, still in that same unhurried voice, I want you to know that I've been recording this conversation since you walked in. My phone is on the counter." Complete silence. "I'm not asking for anything," she said. "I'm just letting you know." He left. The woman with him left. The door closed. Ruthie didn't say anything for a long moment. I could hear her breathing still steady, but with an undercurrent of something that told me her hands were shaking. "I'm sorry you had to hear that," she said finally. And then, very quietly, "I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner." She stayed in my room the rest of her shift. She didn't clean. She just sat in the chair by my bed with her crossword puzzle in her lap, not doing it, and hummed that low hymn until the light in the window changed from black to dark blue. What happened next didn't happen all at once. It happened the way real things do, slowly, then suddenly. Ruthie went to the charge nurse that morning. She played the recording. The charge nurse called the nursing supervisor. The nursing supervisor called the patient advocate. The patient advocate called the attending physician, who called the neurologist, who called the hospital administrator, and somewhere in that chain, someone called my mother. I know this because I heard my mother's voice that afternoon in a way I hadn't heard it before, not the careful, hopeful voice she used when she sat by my bed, but a raw, uncontrolled sound from the hallway that told me she had been told something she couldn't process standing still. She came into my room and held my hand with both of hers and didn't say anything for a long time. "I should have known," she said finally. "I wanted to believe he loved you. I wanted to be wrong about the feeling I had." The hospital contacted law enforcement 2 days later. My husband was asked to come in for a conversation that he walked into thinking was about my care. He did not leave the same way he entered. The recording, combined with his documented requests to alter my care plan against medical recommendation, was enough for an emergency petition to transfer medical decision-making authority to my mother. I didn't find this out in real time. I found it out slowly, in pieces, from the people around me. My mother telling me what she knew. Ruthie telling me what she'd heard in the hallway. The neurologist explaining, matter-of-factly, that certain changes had been made and that my care team was fully focused on my recovery. And then, 3 days after Ruthie's recording changed, everything I blinked. Not involuntarily. Not a reflex. I blinked because the neurologist held up 2 fingers and asked me to blink twice if I understood her. I blinked twice. She put her hand over her mouth for just a moment, then she composed herself and said, "Good. That's very good, Claire. Let's keep going." The thing about recovery that no one tells you is that it doesn't feel like winning. It feels like learning to walk through wet concrete. Every small movement costs more than it should. Every session with the speech therapist ends with me exhausted in a way that sleep doesn't fully fix. The left side of my body woke up like a limb that had fallen asleep, that terrible combination of numbness and pins that signals blood coming back to something that wasn't sure it was coming back. But it was coming back. My mother was there every day. She read to me, even when I didn't need to be read to magazines, the backs of cereal boxes, whatever she had. She narrated her life to fill my silence, and I loved her for it in a way I couldn't fully express until the speech therapist handed me a letter board and I pointed to the letters one by one until they spelled, "I hear you. I always heard you." She held the board against her chest like it was something fragile. Ruthie came to see me during visiting hours now, not just during her shift. She brought her granddaughter once, a girl with 2 braids and a gap-toothed smile, who looked at me very seriously and said, "Nana Roo says you're getting better." I nodded, just barely, and she nodded back like we'd made a deal. The first time I said Ruthie's name out loud 4 months after the stroke, when my speech was still slow and effortful and not entirely reliable, she sat very still and then said, "Say it again." So I did. She laughed. The kind of laugh that has crying underneath it but comes out as joy anyway. "Okay," she said. "Okay. You're going to be all right." Rehabilitation was 8 months of small humiliations and smaller victories. I learned to walk again in a therapy gym that smelled like rubber mats, between parallel bars, with a physical therapist who told me flat out on the first day, "This is going to be annoying before it gets better." She was right. It was annoying. Then it got better. I moved back into my childhood bedroom at my mother's house. My husband, my ex-husband, by the time I left the rehab facility, because my mother and the attorney she'd hired had been efficient and thorough, had moved out of our apartment. The apartment itself I didn't want back. I let it go with the rest of the life I had been living before the Tuesday morning and the steam rising off the oatmeal. Starting over at 30, with a slight drag in my left foot and a speech pattern that still occasionally searched for words the way you search for keys you know you put somewhere, is not what I had imagined for this chapter of my life. But I was the one choosing it. That was different. That mattered more than I can explain. My mother made the spare room into my room the way she used to. When I was small, she put good curtains up and a lamp I liked and a stack of books on the nightstand that she thought I might want, and she didn't ask me anything I wasn't ready to answer. Ruthie came for dinner twice a month. She brought her granddaughter, who had decided she liked me, and expressed this by bringing me drawings of horses with her initials in the corner. I put them on the refrigerator. Then on 2 walls of my room. Then on a 3rd wall, because she was prolific and committed. I went back to teaching the following September. Half days at first a classroom of second graders who accepted me with the easy matter-of-factness of children who have not yet learned to perform sensitivity. One boy asked me on the first day why I talked slowly, and I told him my brain had been hurt and was still healing, and he said oh and went back to his crayon without ceremony. It was the most uncomplicated response I had received in 11 months, and I appreciated it enormously. My speech continued to improve. My left side continued to rebuild itself. I ran a 5K 14 months after my stroke. Ran is generous. I jogged and then walked the last half mile, and my mother and Ruthie stood at the finish line with a hand-lettered sign that said, Claire, in letters large enough to be read from space. I cried at the finish line. Not from emotion, exactly. More from the simple shock of being somewhere other than a hospital room. Of having moved through space under my own power. Of having a Tuesday morning that was just a Tuesday morning. 2 years out, my life looks nothing like the one I thought I was going to have. It is smaller in some ways and bigger in others. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment 3 miles from my mother's house. I teach second grade. I have a mild, well-managed medication routine and a very particular relationship with my own voice. I am careful with it now in a way I wasn't before, because I know what it cost to get it back. Ruthie retired from the hospital last spring. She says she'd been ready for years, that she was only staying out of habit and loyalty, and that my recovery gave her permission to finally go. I don't know how to carry that gracefully, so I just carry it. She comes to my apartment on Sunday mornings. She brings her granddaughter, who is 8 now, and has expanded from horses to also drawing elaborate maps of imaginary countries. We do the crossword together. Ruthie still gets stuck on geography. I've started intentionally not knowing the answers on the easy ones to let her get there first. We don't talk about the night in my hospital room very often. It's not something that needs to be rehearsed or processed out loud between us. It happened. It changed everything. And here we are. But once, on a Sunday in late October, when the 3 of us were at the kitchen table and her granddaughter had fallen asleep on the couch in the middle of a cartoon and the room was quiet and still, Ruthie set down her pen and looked at me with the expression of someone deciding to say the thing they've been holding. I almost didn't say anything, she said. When he was in your room, I had the recording and I almost talked myself out of using it. I thought, who am I? I'm just the person who cleans the floors. Who is going to listen to me? I put my coffee cup down. I thought about Denise, she said. I thought about the things I didn't say when she was sick. When I could see things going wrong and I told myself it wasn't my place. She shook her head. I made myself a promise that I wasn't going to do that again. I reached across the table and put my hand over hers. I'm glad you kept it, I said. She nodded once. Then she picked up her pen and pointed to 16 across. Landlocked European nation, she said. 8 letters. Austria, I said. She wrote it in. The thing I want to say, the thing I would have said into the silence of that hospital room if I could have spoken, is that I am not the same person who stood at a stove on a Tuesday morning watching steam rise. I know that. I've stopped trying to be. The woman I am now walks with a slight unevenness that will probably always be there. She speaks carefully and means what she says. She does not take Tuesday mornings for granted. She knows that the people who save us are not always the people we expect. They are not always the loudest or the most obvious or the ones holding impressive credentials. Sometimes they come in at 11 o'clock with a cart that squeaks and a phone in their pocket and the quiet conviction that an unconscious woman deserves to be spoken to like a person. Sometimes the smallest kind of faithfulness is the thing that holds the whole world in place. I was inside the silence for a long time. Long enough to learn that silence is not empty. It's full of everything people say when they think no one is listening. I listened. And when I finally found my voice again, the first thing I did was say the name of the woman who kept me company in the dark.